Okay, tonight I want to discuss with you an idea that I think is perfect for the time that we're in right now, right in between the Parshios, Motzei Shabbos, Kodesh, Vayechi, and we're in between, obviously, therefore, Vayechi and Shemos. And I think this is a very important topic. It's a topic that I get asked about all the time, and it's a topic that certainly applies to you as teenagers, and then as well as throughout life. So we find an interesting idea in Parshas Vayechi that Yaakov gives very tailor-made specific brachos to each one of the Shvatim. Each one, it's not a general bracha v'hatzlacha, but each one gets their own specific, unique bracha, emphasizing strengths at times, trying to encourage to overcome weaknesses at times. We find that Yaakov even was sikel es yadav, he switched his hands when it came to Ephraim and Menashe, once again, making very specific the brachos that he was giving and the observations and acknowledgments he was making of each individual shevet that ultimately becomes the tribes and the heads, the Roshim, the Roshei Am, the heads and leaders of Klal Yisrael. Continuing along this line, we have in next week's Parsha Shemos a counting of Bnei Yisrael. And counting itself is an activity that emphasizes, again, each individual, 1, 2, 3, 4, you're counting and acknowledging the uniqueness of each individual, but then you come to a sum total, and the total number is this amount for each Shevet and for Klal Yisrael. So counting itself acknowledges each individual, but then of course it also acknowledges the whole, the sum total, the unit that is the nation of Klal Yisrael. And really I think that these two ideas not only are not a contradiction to each other, but they work beautifully with each other, and it applies to us in a very practical way. Both individualism, recognizing you are unique and special with your unique set of kochos, your strengths and weaknesses, and collectivism, recognizing that we all have an identity as a unit, as a whole of Klal Yisrael, as a nation. Really, I think when we think about this topic, it can help us not feel that we need to be so different from others in order to express our individualism. I'll elaborate on that in a minute. But it actually can encourage us to be together with each other more, to be closer to each other, to empathize versus sympathize with each other. Empathy actually means to put yourself in someone else's shoes. Those of you who went to TA will know that from my talks there. To empathize actually means to put yourself in the other person's shoes, to really feel from that person's perspective, not just to sympathize, to feel bad, to say, I feel bad for you and move on, but to really feel what the other person's feeling. Many times that itself is enough to make the other person feel a little bit better, like someone's able to share what's difficult for them. It's not just for bad, by the way, it's for good too. To really share the simcha of another person, to empathize with that person, again, it shows a real connection, but it takes a certain level of self-confidence. It takes a certain level of, I'm comfortable with who I am, and I'm happy for you, I'm not jealous. I want to share in your simcha, and unfortunately, if you're going through a hard time, I want to share in your difficulty and make it better for you. It creates tremendous achdus. So these two ideas, individualism, who am I as an individual, and then collectivism, who are we as a group, actually play off of each other. The healthier an individual is, the more he can bind together with other people in a unit and in a group in a healthy way and in a strong way, not feeling that he's harming himself by doing so. And you can have healthy collectivism, a healthy group, a healthy shir, a healthy grade, a healthy yeshiva, ultimately a healthy Klal Yisrael as a whole. We find the Medrash tells us that in Mitzrayim, Klal Yisrael did not change their names, their speech, and their clothes. All these externals were the same. They maintained Yiddish names. They maintained a certain style of speech, of language and talking, and they maintained the same external clothing, the same general dress that they all wore. So I ask you, were the Yidden then, because they maintained that in Mitzrayim and throughout, and it was said as a positive in the Medrash for Klal Yisrael. Were they all the same? When you got to know each individual Jew, did they all just seem the same? Did they all have the same personality? Did they all have the same opinions and perspectives? And the obvious answer is no. Throughout history, the Jew has always been looked at as always questioning, always having a unique perspective, always willing to and even encouraged in the right settings to express his opinion, to question, to look for answers, to look for truth. That's something that our Chabura here is the whole purpose of it. One of the main purposes is for that expression. And in general, we encourage the internal expression of individualism. And in fact, I would argue that when the externals are the same, when we talk and speak similar to each other, when we dress similar to each other, it actually encourages true individualism, which is the internal individual expressing himself. The internal individual, his beliefs, what makes him happy or sad, upset, pleased, his opinions, his personalities, his perspectives, that's really what makes a person different. The way that the question's usually asked to me is, what's the purpose of having a dress code? Why do we have to have a dress code? Why can't I wear this or that? So I'm not going to get into any specific detail. By the way, on the surface, of course, there is something to be said for a uniform. Soldiers and athletes, officers have uniforms. They can be identified, and they can identify each other, and they can feel more ba'achdus through that external similarity, which encourages them all with that like-minded mission that they have. In the team as athletes to win the game, as officers to defend the law, as soldiers to defend the country, and as Yidden to defend the honor of the Ribono Shel Olam, to try to be Mekadesh Shem Shemayim, to remember and remind ourselves never chas v'shalom to be Mechalel Shem Shemayim, to always act in a certain way, recognizing that we are the Am HaNivchar, the chosen nation. It comes with a lot of work and responsibility. But it can breed pride and privileged feelings, because through that work and responsibility, we have an even greater opportunity to have a relationship with the Ribono Shel Olam. Every single human being in the world can and should have a relationship with the Ribono Shel Olam. But Hashem gives Klal Yisrael an even greater opportunity for an even deeper relationship. But it's work. It's a mission that we embrace, and that similarity of mission that we all have each our individual ways of doing it, but we encourage that way of thinking and that way of acting through that similar dress and uniform, so to speak, that we have. So in of itself, it's not even such a strong question, why should we have a uniform? But I want to make it a little bit deeper. Based on what we're saying, we encourage differences of personality. We recognize each individual's differences of strengths and kochos. And many times guys ask, how do I know what I'm supposed to do with my life? Should I go into Klei Kodesh? Should I become a Rosh Yeshiva or a Magid Shir or a Rebbe? Should I become a doctor, a lawyer, a professional? Should I work in business? What should I do with my life? What should I do as the Parnasa part of my life? So I always say, first of all, right now you're in high school. There's no reason for you to have to be thinking about that more than, yes, there should be some English that you're doing in order to keep yourself up to date so that when the time comes for a decision to be made, you'll be where you need to be in order to have the options open for you. You're not closing doors. But one thing's for sure, no matter what you end up becoming, you're going to want to be able to have kochos and skills and abilities in learning. Talmud Torah is a mitzvah on every single Jewish person. And therefore, you want to be able to be good at it and to have a greater connection to the Ribono Shel Olam's Torah throughout your entire life. Whether your life is going to be filled mostly with other avenues and other responsibilities, and you're going to learn for 45 minutes a day, or you're going to learn for an hour and a half a day, or 4 hours a day, or your entire day is going to be filled with learning because that's the job that you're in. Whatever. It doesn't matter. You always want that to be, you want to get better and better at that. So you're doing exactly what you need to be doing now, being in a yeshiva, where there's some English in order to keep you up to date in the basic secular knowledges that you'll need to keep options open for you. as well as putting a lot of emphasis on training yourself to become Talmidei Chachamim, that every single person should become, no matter what area, or should strive to become the best that they could become in, no matter what area of Parnasa or areas of responsibilities that they have in life in addition to Talmud Torah. And so, that is something that we're all similar to each other, no matter what we end up becoming. And I tell guys, you don't need to think about that now. You're in 10th grade, even 11th and 12th grade. Keep up the fact that you're keeping up to date with these other responsibilities and areas of knowledge, and you're keeping options open for yourself. Even if you'd go beyond high school to yeshiva for a few years, even if you get married and go to kollel for 2-3 years, which in general is a nice recommendation for people to start their house out, even if it's kollel for 1, 2, 3 years, that doesn't close any doors. As long as you're thinking ahead, where am I probably going to end up going afterwards? And you take some classes or courses if necessary, if that's the direction that you're going in. You're building and starting out your marriage and your life in such a special way, understanding basic levels of halacha and hashkafa through those years of learning. And then you go on and you live your life with continuing to learn, obviously, every day, but with taking into account the other responsibilities that you have. Some might go to kollel for 7 or 10 years or 12, whatever. But everyone can understand and appreciate the advantages of that type of beginning has for a person. The idea is you're not closing doors. Just because you don't start a particular ASEC or an avenue of pursuit at 18 or 20, it doesn't mean that now you close doors because you might start at 23 or 25. It's just simply not true. You have to be responsible and you have to know the practicality of these, and every individual situation is different. But generally, it's something that's very doable. The idea here is that we all have a similar mission in life as a collective unit. To learn Torah, to do the Torah, to act according to the Torah, to spread the light of the Ribono Shel Olam, to be Mekadesh Shem Shamayim wherever we go. And I would argue that it is in fact the similar externals that we maintain, the similar dress code style that we have, that actually in an environment where we encourage questions and opinions, it actually helps to develop your own internals, your own internal individuality, which is what the true individuality is. If we all dress drastically different from each other, with all sorts of colors and styles, that doesn't make it impossible to develop your internal individuality, but it makes it less natural. I already feel so different from you on the external. I don't have a need to develop myself and express myself and think about who am I? Where are my strengths and weaknesses? What are my opinions on topics? I have less natural motivation to do it because after all, on the outside, we're all so different from each other. Whereas, if on the outside we're all similar to each other, it actually can encourage in the right atmosphere that Judaism provides. It can, through the encouragement of Rebbeim and teachers, to develop yourself individually. Then the outside being similar actually encourages a greater development of the inside, of the internal individuality. External uniformity can actually set the stage for internal individualism when it is encouraged, which we certainly do. Look at the Gemara itself. In the Gemara, you see vast array of opinions on every single topic. The greatest way to arrive at the truth in any area is to listen to everyone's different perspectives and opinions and ways of saying it, and then to think about the pros and ultimately come to the greatest truth. The Gemara itself shows us that by example, in how many different opinions and arguments that are made on every topic and every svara that they want to consider in order to arrive at that truth. I heard two interesting things from Rabbi Michal Berkowitz, Tzvi Berkowitz's son, the Rebbe and TA. One idea is when you have identical twins. You see, the Chazal tell us that Klal Yisrael's opinions are as different as their faces. So what's interesting is even if we have a dress code and we all dress similar, nobody's faces are the same, except for identical twins, which I'm getting to. No one's face is the same, so we actually automatically have, and the face is the sight on the person that gives off wisdom. You can look at any place on a person's body, you don't see an expression of wisdom, but you look at the face, and the face tells a story. You see insight. You see emotion. There's tremendous wisdom on a face, and everyone's face is different. Again, that just shows you, even in the external, it gives us a hint, and it shows us that true individualism actually is through our kochos hanefesh, through what's inside, through our internal personality, opinions, our internal traits. That's where the true individualism comes from. And if you have identical twins, and they look exactly the same, even on their face, everything's the same. Imagine you dress them the same, as probably parents would do when they're babies. How do you describe them to anyone? How do you describe each child, each twin? What do you say? You're forced to have to talk about, oh, he's a little bit more like this, and he's a little bit more like that. His personality is a little bit more this way, and his personality is that way. He likes this, he likes that. He acts this way. You're talking so much more about who they really are than simply some type of feature on their body or some type of clothing that they wear. Secondly, he told me that he once heard, I think he said he might have heard it from Rabbi Orlovsky, that imagine if we do limit ourselves to individualism being expressed by the shirt that we wear. As he said over, imagine if one day you leave your shirt at home. You're doomed. Your whole source of individuality is lost. You feel like you're nothing special, when really it has nothing to do with your shirt and everything to do with who you are on the inside. So hear it loud and clear. The question can actually be turned upside down. Instead of the question being, why do we have a dress code? Why can't we express ourselves and be who we want to be? And doesn't the yeshiva understand that we're all different from each other? Shouldn't we want to express and develop our differences and our uniqueness that we all have, our unique traits and strengths and weaknesses? And the answer is just the opposite. It is by dressing the same that we actually are able to even more strongly and naturally encourage the internal development of your strengths and weaknesses, your styles, your personalities. That is the true individualism. The external similarity has one other advantage. Besides what we spoke about before in terms of the idea of different groups wearing uniforms and the similar mission of life that we have, it also retains our identity. It helps to retain our identity. As Mark Twain says, that there's a proof. You see, he doesn't call it a proof, but he observes from the history of the Jews, the uncanny, unparalleled history of the survival of the Jews. It's unbelievable, and it shows something special about the Jewish people. One of those fantastic features of the history and the survival of Judaism is we survive without a land. Every society, every culture, every country has a land. Maybe you could say just recently we've started to be able to get back to having an identifiable Jewish land. But for thousands of years, until just decades ago, we had no land that we could say we're ruling over, that we have. And even to this day, it's only to an extent that we have it. Nothing like what we had at the times of David HaMelech. Because the land is the physical external feature that binds everyone together. Without it, you lose your national identity. So actually maintaining our names, the way we talk with sensitivities, we don't want to ever speak in ways that are usser, with curse words or with other types of inappropriate words. And even beyond that, we want to be a little extra sensitive. We want to have a little bit more of a unique style to the cultural way in which we talk. We might call certain non-Jewish holidays and adjust the names slightly. Why? Because it's usser to call it by its name? Maybe not. Maybe yes, maybe no. We could talk about that. But we want to maintain a level of uniqueness to even the way that we speak. Because that's the uniformity that we have on the outside helps us stay together, especially through this long, dark gullus that we're in. But it doesn't take away one iota, and in fact encourages and breeds a greater level of true individuality from within. This all leads to the balance of individualism and collectivism, of the counting in Parshas Shemos that we're coming to, of the brachos that Yaakov gave to each individual shevet, recognizing their each individual kochos and that they should each be doing something different in their life. Not everyone should be doing the same thing with their lives, as we discussed. But there are common denominators that exist and apply for everyone at the same time, and there's no contradiction there. We each have our own kochos, our own strengths and weaknesses that we should embrace and be proud of. It's what makes us special, and we should develop them to the extent that we can. It is through that healthy self-confidence in ourselves, not looking over our shoulders at others, what does he have or not have, how is he doing, what's he doing, but rather comparing ourselves only against ourselves. How much better can I be doing? Not how much closer can I get to him. How much better can I be doing? Being focused on yourself actually then makes you a greater part of the whole. And then, of course, it leads to a greater level of achdus, a greater level of that collectivism, of that Am Yisrael, that when the counting comes, and you do 1, 2, 3, 4, there's only one 4 in the whole counting, only one number 4, but it's also 4 out of the sum total. It's also part of that unified group. And the greater level of achdus that we have, the more nachas ruach we give to the Ribono Shalom. We make Hashem more and more proud through that nation, that totality of Klal Yisrael, and we enhance that totality through us developing our individual strengths and enhancing the weaknesses, becoming better at our weaknesses, trying to become better in every way that we can. That greater self-confidence, just being focused on us, builds the sum total. And Amir Hashem, it will give the Ribono Shalom so much nachas through the greater achdus that we can have. One of the practical ideas that I mentioned to the 11th grade recently is to think about, I spoke about this idea in general of gratitude and jealousy, is to think about one person. Think about one person, not your best friend. Someone who's not your best friend. Even better, someone that you don't like so much. And think about one nice thing about them. The externals influence the internals. The chitzonius ma'or, the pnimius, in that if you act in a certain way, it will influence how you believe and what you think about. And if you just think once a day of one nice thing, one strength, one positive about one other person around you, not necessarily your best friend, that actually can encourage you to believe and feel along those lines of other people are special and that's great. I'm special too. It doesn't affect or hurt me to think along those lines. And the more that we think that way, the more cohesive that unit, that achdus becomes within the shir, within your social group, within the yeshiva, within Klal Yisrael, and that achdus will give the Ribono Shalom so much nachas. And Amir Hashem, through this avodah, he'll bring Mashiach Tzidkenu b'mehir v'yameinu. Amen.